Chapter 1. Heaven Shaker. The fiercest serpent may be overcome by a swarm of ants. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, Commander-in-Chief of the Imperial Japanese Navy, 1940. March 5, 1943, Tokyo. The Commander-in-Chief of the Imperial Japanese Navy Combined Fleet opened a letter. 6 sheets of paper spilled out, revealing 874 delicate characters written in a man's blood. The reader, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, hero of the brilliantly conceived and executed Pearl Harbor attack, found himself gritting his teeth as he read a most unusual petition. The request was like nothing he'd seen in this war, not a request for supplies or fuel, no bureaucratic infighting, no resistance to battle tactics. Instead, it was an impassioned plea asking for the greatest risk of all, and therefore was penned in blood to show the author's deepest sincerity. The writer begged for permission to develop a manned torpedo for suicide attacks against enemy ships. The request came from Sub-Lieutenant Hiroshi Kuroki, a brilliant young submariner and a rising star in the Imperial Navy. He acknowledged that his idea was radical, but argued that it would mean the sacrifice of only one life to sink an enemy ship. Such a strategy could turn the tide of war. 100 men, 100 U.S. capital ships destroyed. The wisdom of the centuries drove Kuroki, who believed that fervent devotion to duty and sacrifice, invoking the ancient warrior code of Bushido, valuing loyalty and obedience and honor above life, could defeat the overwhelming might of American forces. The idea of suicide as part of military duty had been embedded in Japanese culture for thousands of years. An honorable warrior's death, embodied in the chivalric code of Bushido, was revered in Japan. Its core tenets included honesty, loyalty, and honor unto death. The admiral's thoughts turned back to the attack on Pearl Harbor in late 1941 and the 5 midget submarines deployed there to bombard the American ships. He had considered the mission to be suicidal, yet it had achieved some good, even though 9 of the 10 submariner pilots lost their lives. Just before the attack on Hawaii, a photograph had been taken of the 10 pilots, 2 to a midget submarine, who would chance fate at Pearl Harbor. The submariners who perished received almost more adulation in Japan than the aircraft pilots who dropped bombs on the harbor. The death and subsequent deification of the 9 hero gods reinforced the idea of submarines as suicide weapons and inspired other young men to follow their example. Suicide in the course of military duty was a highly honorable course, but by contrast, to fail on a mission was an unbearable disgrace. The 10th man from Pearl Harbor's original submariners evaded glory as he washed up on the beach and was captured. Reviled as a traitor, his image was painted out of the original pre-attack photograph, leaving only the remaining 9 hero gods. Admiral Yamamoto reread the petition. Here the concept of suicide submarines took on a new twist, as passionately argued by the author. Accepting death if it came was not the same thing as intentional suicide. Death in battle was always a noble end, but it was not always required. That distinction created an essential difference between the midget submarines and the Kaiten, as the suicide submersibles would come to be called. The difference was the pilot's fate. Midget submarines were designed to release torpedoes, but it was certainly possible for a pilot to escape and still fulfill his mission. The destruction of his submarine was not automatic with an attack. A Kaiten submarine, however, meant certain death for the pilot, who must aim his vehicle at an enemy target ship and ride it to its disastrous conclusion. Whether Admiral Yamamoto would have supported Kuroki's fervent request was never recorded. Only a month later, the esteemed leader was killed when U.S. pilots attacked his plane over the Solomon Islands. And yet Kuroki soldiered on. Despite the crushing loss of Yamamoto and his hoped-for support, the submariner continued to urge other decision-makers in the Imperial Japanese Navy to develop the suicide submarine as an offensive weapon. Another submariner, Ensign Sekio Nishina, joined him in the quest to produce a suicide torpedo craft. Their mutual passion arose in part from the Battle of Midway, when 4 Japanese aircraft carriers had been destroyed and the momentum of the war in the Pacific shifted to the Allies.